Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports. It is the I don't know if the meetings have officially started. I think that's this week. I think we're just on the cusp of Major League Baseball's winter meetings. I am joined by our Mariners writer, one of two Mariners writers, but our main Mariners writer, Brittany Wisner. Did I get that right?
Yeah, good enough.
Okay, good. I didn't want to butcher that immediately as we start the show here. The goal that Britt and I had is to sort of, the MLB offseason until we get closer to spring training can be a dark, boring, and sort of lifeless time, especially for Mariners fans. So we wanted to kind of bring different topics and discussions on a weekly basis to you, just to kind of keep that rolling. It'd be great if we got more of the whatever podcast that Divish and Jude do, because I love hearing those two go at each other. But they don't
Hmm.
do that much either. So we wanted to, do what we can with what we know. And hopefully, throughout the weeks we'll hear something big in terms of additions. And that's where we start, Britt. With all
Yeah.
we have is rumors. We don't have anything substantial. The only team that's done anything free agent wise is the Angels, which is intriguing.
Hmm.
um, I'll use that word and I'll be
To say the
nice.
least.
Um, so the first one, and I think you kind of put your thoughts on the lovely internet about it.
Hmm.
There was a report that the from a friend Adam Jude with the Seattle Times that the Mariners had contacted the Philadelphia Phillies about infielder Alec Bohm, as it seems they want to move on from him. Um, but the initial asking price was either George Kirby or Logan Gilbert. I think I'm gonna try to not swear on this. We did our storm roundtable, and I did like went 45 minutes in before I said a bad word.
That's pretty
I
good.
did I did really good. Um, it's and again, I wasn't gonna use any of those words, but for lack of swearing, it was just incredibly ridiculous for
Yeah.
Philadelphia to start there unless you're packaging several players from that lineup. So, um, I
Yeah.
guess if you want to put more words into that about how ludicrous that is,
Yeah.
um,
I mean, at that point, just say you're not serious about trading him. If that's the legitimate ask. And I think it is important to remember that teams know the Mariners have backed themselves into a difficult position with their budget and the holes that exist in their roster. So it seems that teams maybe, and I don't know if this is going to be the trend, but judging by Philly, they feel comfortable with an outrageous ask. So I will be very curious to see if other teams follow suit, if they feel like the Mariners are so desperate that they would legitimately trade away Gilbert or Kirby. I think it's been made pretty clear that that's not happening. And also, the Mariners have huge holes in their lineup and not a clear path forward on how to fill those holes. So in my mind, it does set up an interesting precedent for how a lot of these conversations might go with other teams. And also, my question would be, okay, are they really that serious about trading Alec Bohm? There have been a ton of questions about his clubhouse fit in Philly. He had the whole "I hate this freaking place" incident. Um, I can't speak too much to what his clubhouse fit might be with the Mariners, but he's had essentially two good offensive months, maybe three, that got him an all-star nod, and then he's been fairly mediocre. So I certainly would entertain an Alec Bohm trade, but certainly not for Gilbert or Kirby.
oh, of course, and yeah, I think there's two ways you have to put this into thought. This idea of a potential, move with Philadelphia. Are they serious? Yeah, because it's like at the end of the day, as average or mediocre as he has been, he's better than what the Mariners have had at second base, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
It's another like, hey, what are we gonna do here? And there have been reports that the Mariners would be fine, slotting in a platoon. I know people don't like hearing that word with the Mariners, of Dylan Moore and or Ryan Bliss um at second base. And I think that's fine. I mean, that's serviceable.
Yeah.
not Scott. But because Dylan Moore's fine. I have no problem with him. I mean, it was really cool to see him win the Gold Glove award at the utility position. He had his like Linsanity run in the early part of the year where he did have some pop. And we know he's like got power. He had a lot of time to play this past season, and he didn't show you he could hit decently on a consistent level, right? Like he'll have
No,
his
his
strong runs each season,
yep.
but you don't see it over a consistent stretch of time. And I would love to be proven wrong, but you can't go off of hope all the time. Like you can think that guys are going to take jumps, but with especially how bad that second base position has been, right? I think you're sick of it. You want to proven if it becomes available. If nothing's available realistically, you just have to. I'd go with that. That's fine. Everybody loves Ryan Bliss. Like I love his story, but uh, he looked overwhelmed with fastballs last year,
Yeah.
late into the season,
Yep.
right? And um, Divish has said this before. He doesn't have the arm for anything outside of second base.
No.
Like the end of the season, Jorge Polanco was really banged up with his knee, and the thought was that you could put Bliss out there because he'll stop the ball at least. Um, but yeah, those two guys have trade offs. Dylan can't hit consistently. He can field. I mean, I'm not saying he's perfect, right? But he can field. We saw that with hardware. He just can't hit consistently. And well, maybe not trade offs because I say Bliss doesn't. He's not super great at either thing. So, um, like again, that's the if they're realistic about it. If there's a mine where you can't actually get them, I'd be fine with it. I mean, maybe it is a change of scenery, as you mentioned. He had the well chronicled incident where he didn't like being there in the moment. Um, he's not that old, I don't believe. Um, and again, change of scenery can do a lot for a player. I wouldn't touch either of the. I wouldn't touch the four starters that aren't Castillo, and we'll talk about Luis, but I mean, well, that's the other thing. Okay, if we're gonna do a Bohm trade, do they want prospects? They're obviously in a win now situation. What do you give them? I don't know. I mean, I know Philly
Uh,
wants to add a starter, right? So
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And if we're having the prospect conversation, I don't think the Mariners are in any position to be hoarding prospects, so to speak.
no.
That absolutely cannot be an option. I think at this point, everyone has to be on the table, whether it is Harry Ford or Las Montes. I think those all have to be options to part with. This is it. Like this is your window closing if it hasn't already. So there shouldn't be anyone off limit. Just circling back to second base really quick. I know we were talking
Yeah.
about Alec Bohm, who's a third baseman, but when we talk about Ryan Bliss and Dylan Moore and just the infield
Oh
in
yeah.
general, I do think that a name we're forgetting about is Leo Rivas.
Yeah.
And it seemed that Dan Wilson really liked Leo Rivas. There seemed to be some admiration there. I don't know if it's just because he won him his first game as a manager, but
Yeah.
um, I would be curious if Leo Rivas ends up playing a larger role on the 2025 Mariners than maybe we anticipated or have even talked about. I have hardly heard his
Yeah.
name mentioned at
Mm-hmm.
all. So that's one thing that's interesting to me to also think about.
No, that's a good point. And that was something I was thinking about as well. Yeah, sorry, I got Alec Bohm. I got my second base discussion all mixed up.
He could
Um,
probably play second too.
I mean, Alex Bregman's talking about playing second too. So who knows?
Yes, yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, Leo was really fun to cover. He was a really nice guy. He would always say hi to the media when he would come into the clubhouse. And I mean, he was well serviceable. I'm not saying we're just gonna put a clump of these infielders that the Mariners have collected into the serviceable tab. This is what they are.
It
Yeah, I
is.
think I think that's a good thing that you bring up because there has been the Dylan Moore and Ryan Bliss discussion, but Rivas finished the year in Seattle. He didn't get sent back down,
Yeah.
you know. So yeah, I mean, I'd put him in there. I mean, he was a pesky guy. He wasn't quite Jose Caballero, but he was kind of. is a little bit like that in some regards, you know. So I would throw him in that second base discussion. But yeah, I mean, with Bohm, like you said, the prospects, you know, you've got enough, and they're all essentially all except for Laz, I think, and a few others who are lower down on the rankings, but you're all like top guys are all infield prospects. So you can get rid of a few of them and be fine. You know, I mean, if you move Cole Young, yeah, you've got other guys in there. Um, I know people have talked about Cole Young. I just don't think he's ready yet. And I think everyone else is kind of the reports have said he's not going to be ready until
Yeah.
maybe late in this year. But yeah, like you said, well, then in pitching, if we go back to Philly and pitching, they want Emerson Hancock? I don't think so. I mean, I'd ship him out if they want him, but I just don't think Jerry can sweet talk that much, you know.
No.
So yeah, I
No,
think,
I think you'd have to make them bite with some prospects. And I don't know if they would.
and yeah, so it's that one. Like I would, like you said, I'd certainly take it, but I don't see a clear path to that in realistic forms. This one of the three that we're going to talk about, I think, is the most realistic of something happening in Chicago with the Cubs. You
Mhm.
know, I feel like we've heard about Nico Hoerner's name a lot over the last few years. Ian Happ's another guy, but they don't really need outfield anymore. It seems again, I don't anything can happen with this team. Um, and Cody Bellinger have both been names that have been floated around the Mariners. So people have thrown Isak Paredes in there, but I don't, from what I understand, like you might have heard about this as well, but I don't think the Paredes and the Rosarena families get along well. So I don't
That
know if they will reunite those guys on a team again. And
that's
he
what
didn't
it
perform
sounded
that
like.
well with Chicago, right? So there's like a double negative there with Isak Paredes. So I would just ignore that if I can. Um, yeah, what are your thoughts on this? Because we chatted a little bit about this in the beginning, but Bellinger's a shorter term deal, but he's a good amount of money.
Yeah.
Lord knows the Mariners don't have an abundance of that.
Yeah,
So
so Belly's owed 27.5 million in 2025. Um, and if we're going off Jude and Divish's reportings, I think it comes out to about 15 million that the Mariners have realistically to spend. So if Cody Bellinger is a conversation piece, I'd imagine you are somehow finding a way to um, shed one of the Mitch contracts, at least. I don't I don't know how much smoke there realistically is around Cody Bellinger for the Mariners. I do know that there's been quite a bit of smoke around Nico Hoerner and the Mariners, and potentially a three-team trade because the Cubs are going to want major league talent in return.
yes.
And I think the White Sox were thrown into that conversation as well. I I can get behind a Nico Hoerner trade if the price is right.
Yeah.
I love the strikeout rate, super low strikeout rate. This team certainly needs that. He's good defensively. I think 10 outs above average in 2024 at second base. He slashed 273, 335, 373 on 2024, which was actually his lowest of the last 3 years. So that's a
Oh,
708 OPS. And
wow.
that was his worst year of the last 3 years. So I it's certainly better than what you have, than our quote unquote serviceable options. The price
The
would have to be
serviceable
right.
bin.
Yeah, the the bin, the pile. The price would have to be right. He is due 12 million in 2025. So again, if you're looking at that and the Mariners have 15 mil to spend and they still have to go find a first baseman, um, if any of these things are going to happen, it feels like you inevitably have to shed yourself of one of the Mitch's contracts.
Yeah, and I want to touch on a few things because Lord knows you make some great points, and then I have to sit here and I have to recount what I remember. Defensively, I know one of the knocks. We're gonna go back a little bit. I'm not gonna revisit it, but just a point with Alec Bohm. Am I crazy to think that I'm almost okay with anybody you acquire in on the infield being bad defensively or okay or just mediocre? because I feel like Perry Hill is the Jesus of infield and can just fix it. I'm not gonna say he's gonna make you a Gold Glover, but he's certainly gonna make you not suck as much, unless you're
The
Luis
Perry
Urias.
the Perry Hill effect is so incredibly real. I am a full-on believer of that. If there was a church, I would attend that church. I absolutely subscribe to that theory
So
wholeheartedly.
you see what I mean when I say like I read knocks on Bohm's defense. I'm like,
Hmm.
if you're gonna get the guy, I don't care if he's bad defensively.
Yeah,
Perry Hill will fix him. He's an athlete. Unless there's something with his shoulders, I don't know.
yeah,
Like, I think he'll be fine. With Urias, God, I remember watching I was at one of the spring training games and I saw the throw and I was like, I played center field. I think my arm was better at the time. And don't come back and be upset at me about any of these things. I know I wasn't a good athlete. You can look me up. I know I wasn't good. I'm not dunking on anybody. I'm just saying that's how, well, and everybody knew it was bad. It got better, and he made some okay plays when he did get time. But that's what I'm just saying is like, if there's any of these knocks on these infield guys defensively, I don't care. Like, unless they're really old and their arm like has exploded, sure, then it's reasonable. But that's why the Bohm thing, I remember reading that. I was like, who cares? Perry Hill is here. That's all that matters.
absolutely. Yep.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, and I like that you mentioned how Hoerner's numbers were, you mentioned a pretty solid slash line, and this, oh, that's like his lowest year, the last three. Because with Bellinger, I mean, I don't know. Cody Bellinger was a fun player to watch when he was good, and didn't like seemingly have the yips at the end of his Dodgers tenure, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, his numbers the last few years have just not been great. You know, Lord knows that the Jerry DePoto regime loves players who can play everywhere, and he can play the outfield. He can play first base, just like Luke Raley. You know, um, I just feel like it's not a great option, but in my heart, for some reason, I feel like that's what we're gonna get. Like I feel like somehow they'll do the roster like the money dump where it works for Seattle, and we'll get Cody Bellinger, and we'll have to be okay with it. You know, but yeah, no, the White Sox thing is interesting because they have moving pieces as well. There was I believe this is Morrissey, which I know we can only take so much from John Morrissey. Where the White Sox are getting increasingly close to a crochet trade.
Yeah.
And that'll probably happen during the winter meetings, and how probably doesn't shake things up where it matters if there were to be a three-team deal with Seattle. I don't think. The only thing I would imagine that being interesting is um, if they trade Crochet to a team that the Mariners might want to swap a Castillo to. The reporting here says it's that the Yankees, God forbid, um, are believed to be in Crochet. The Red Sox are, so that involves our next topic. Um, that the Reds are also viewed as a real threat. That's fascinating. Um, Okay, Cincinnati. Boston and the Mariners have been talked about in terms of a trade for the last few years since they've been looking for a starter. Um, yeah, did you mention that, Britt? Was it Tristan Cassis was floated to? I think it was the report was an American League team, and it would make a lot of sense just if that was Seattle. Um,
Yeah, and with the report dropping as of I want to say half an hour ago from
hmm,
Alex Spear of the Boston Globe reporting that the Mariners are saying they are open to listening to offers on Luis Castillo. I'd imagine that if that those conversations are legitimately happening, it would be around Tristan Casas. Um, I can see the vision. I don't know what kind of clubhouse fit Tristan Casas would be. But beggars certainly can't be choosers when you're in the
yeah,
Mariners position.
I know it's kind of fascinating, and I was thinking about this when we were talking about the prospects, like. Normally a team that's got a lot of offensive of player prospects, like you should be solidly set up for the trade market. Um, in terms of the teams who seem to be listening on players that the Mariners want, they don't really want those guys. It's like it's just funny how things have worked out for this franchise. And I know a lot of people have a lot of thoughts on this franchise and how things have worked out and how maybe they deserve it. But I can't sit and wallow about things. If I sat and wallowed about things and I had to go through 162 games a year, I don't think I'd be here still. So, yeah, no, I mean, we've just heard so much about Boston and Seattle from a trade perspective in terms of the pitching. Um, I think what I want to focus on is of those five guys, because I am not including Emerson. Um, Castillo makes the most sense to trade. I mean, he's got a decent contract, right, that he signed when he came here. And in terms of what the Mariners are, it's uh, for lack of a nicer word, is poor. You want young and you want controllable, right?
Yeah.
And the other guys are that at the moment. Um, I know he's been floated to Boston. Yeah, Cassis again, like you said, beggars can't be choosers. So if that's what it is, so be it. Um, there have been some smoke about Castillo to the Mets. I just don't know what that return looks like
Yeah.
because I've seen Brett Beatty, and Brett Beatty could be fun if he works. It's the picture of the of the old music machine. It's like it could be fun to fix. I don't, because I don't, he was around what in the Mets disaster season of 22, right? He was kind of there in 23, but not really. Mark Vientos really showed out there at third base for them. Um, who do the Mariners get? And it's
Yeah. And I don't
from
mean
New
to knock
York.
Tristan Casas either. He certainly would be a fine piece. Just when you're looking at the free agent market for starting pitchers right now and imagining what the return could possibly be for Luis Castillo, I just can't help but dream bigger. I don't know
Sure.
what that trade partner would look like, but when you have, and God bless him, love him forever and always, Mariner legend Matthew Boyd
Mm,
getting 30
yeah.
million,
Yeah.
I feel if we're talking Luis Castillo trade, you got to dream a little bit bigger.
Yeah, that's why I just shut anything with the Mets out in that regard because what in terms of their firepower, you look at the top guys, they're not no one in the world would trade Francisco Lindor. Uh, Pete Alonso's a free agent. They're not going to move Mark Vientos. He's young and he's good. Uh, I don't know, and I just ignore outfield because you don't need outfield. And if
Yeah.
you bring in a guy from there to play DH, you're paying too much money to the DH position, right? So yeah,
Which
I
they're
don't know.
arguably already doing.
Yeah, no, yeah, yeah. So it just the Mets. I just kind of ignore that.
Yeah.
Boston makes sense, and it's unfortunate. I don't know what they throw in, and I don't, at this point we don't really know any. If we were to talk about other teams, then it's just speculation because there's just nothing there. Then we're playing, create a trade in a video game, and it's just not what that is. I keep looking because I don't know if we're gonna get a passing bomb. Rick tried to curse us before this and say that, but we'll see. Um,
I've been refreshing every few minutes just to make sure we
I
don't miss
should.
anything.
'Cause you never know. You never know with Jerry when he'll do something. Was Garver Christmas Eve? It was
Yes.
something. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. You never know. So you're gonna be on your toes. And I think the last thing I want to wrap up on for trades is we'll keep with the Castillo vibe and the pitching vibe is uh I don't know if anyone else has put it out, but Jude and Divish have said from the Seattle Times that the Mariners do intend to put out at least a pitch to Roki Sasaki, which is something because then there is a clear like an idea that you
Sure.
could bring Sasaki in and then you move Castillo off, but then it just goes to what we were just talking about: who's going to take him and what are you willing to essentially settle for, right? Um, unless there is someone else who's lurking in the shadows. It's like, yes, I have this Mariners like dream scenario where I've got bats that you want that are at a the MLB level, and we want a starter.
Yeah.
Like,
Unfortunately, the market is not set up in the Mariners' favor this year,
no, it's
especially given
Hollander
the
and
corner they've put themselves
yep,
into. I also think the Mariners would be very comfortable going in if they did trade Castillo with Emerson Hancock as their number
yeah,
five starter. Running him out every 5 days is not the worst thing as your number five starter. And I think there's legitimate conversation around Logan Evans as well, and
Yeah,
potentially him being ready maybe halfway through this upcoming year. So if I don't know that necessarily you have to look at a Roki Sasaki if
sure.
you're moving off of Castillo. I think they'd be perfectly fine going Emerson Hancock, Logan Evans, and whoever else they can plug in there.
Oh yeah, no, and I think a lot of it is my brain just gets so used to guys who give you the swing and miss, who can fan
Yeah.
guys. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously Emerson Hancock is not that guy, and that's fine though, especially when you've got such a good defensive unit the Mariners can play. And like you said, I mean, I think and it's been written and documented and said time and time again. The Mariners rotation is just so great. You know, you bring in a guy who's maybe not quite on that level, and you're like, wait a minute, this isn't what I've been watching. When that's a five starter, you know. So yeah,
Absolutely.
no, that's another thing. That's another scenario where, you know, if it means that we're gonna realistically get better offensively, then yeah, I don't think that would be the end of the world. That's not something where I'm gonna text you and be like, what the, you know, I think that's a fine scenario as long as you are getting a proven bat, right?
Definitely. Yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah, that's what we've got in terms of rumors in that sort of regard. You know, it's just we've got a lot to play with in that regard, obviously. In the impromptu media session that Jerry DePoto had at the end of the year with us, excuse me, during that Oakland series. I'm gonna keep calling them Oakland. So the trading from the rotation was plan Z, but like you said, with the market really playing it all into the Mariners' favor, you probably have to go all the way to plan Z. So anything that you want to leave with in that regard that we didn't touch on in terms of rumors and potential trades before we move on?
No, I guess do we touch on Carlos and JT leading into that?
So let's go to those.
Hey, Charles.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, how about those M's?
Oh, I'm excited.
I know. Where are you going to watch all those away games, though?
Away games. Huh. I was thinking of coming here since, after all, Rough and Tumble is the home of Circling Seattle Sports.
I love that idea. Hope to see y'all here.
Hello there, everybody. Charles Hamaker here with Circling Seattle Sports. I'm joined by Jen Barnes of Rough and Tumble that we happen to be at right now.
Yeah.
Jen, why don't you talk to me a little bit about what we're announcing today, which is our partnership.
I'm so excited about this. First of all, I just want to say thank you. You know, I think all of us here at Rough and Tumble are big fans of what you and your team at Circling Seattle Sports does. And so, you know, I know you know this, but when you came to me with this idea, it just seemed pretty natural. You know, and it's not just me. I think a lot of people in the sports community in Seattle also really respect you and your team. So it's exciting to kind of see these two things melding together, and we're really excited to start implementing some of the things and then hopefully seeing you guys a little bit more often.
Yeah, and so with what Jen says about seeing us more often, you know, we've got a few things in the works, but you'll see watch parties here. We'd like to do a few different of our community drives, which you'll hear about here in a little bit from now. You know, we've got to make our announcements one at a time. I can't drop everything.
Not everything
right.
all at once.
But this has been a home for a lot of our team, whether it's myself, our friend, our photographer Liz is behind the camera. Liz is here often, so our team has kind of adopted this place kind of like our own since I saw you at our soft launch. So, you know, it's been great to have that support. And you know, in a lot of ways, and part of the reason I wanted to do this was the Rough and Tumble embodies a lot of what Circling Seattle Sports wants to do. Obviously with women's sports, with the storm and the rain, but just being, you know, having the game on, every game on.
Yep.
You know, how much of that, you know, did you see a line kind of even before this idea was mentioned when I first met you?
I think it's always felt like that. I mean, you and your team were here on opening night, and you just feel like you're part of the space, so it felt like really natural. And the fact that you actually cover all of the sports really makes your group stand out. So you are always covering all the rain games, all the storm games. You'd have women's softball, you'd have women's basketball, you'd have women's hockey. We love it. So all of those things, and obviously passionate M's fans, passionate Hawks fans, and passionate Kraken and Sounders fans. So really, from our perspective, those two things meshed really well.
So, I mean, you heard it from Jen herself, but this will be our home for all of these events, whether it's you can't make it to these games at home, we're always going to direct you to Rough and Tumble, and obviously the games on the road as well. All these, I mean, we're talking about the rain. They've got their schedule out finally, but this will be our home for that.
Great.
The Storm games on the road, this is our home.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes.
I love it.
And when I mentioned it to Jen, when I first had this idea come up, I had this idea come up wearing a pink wig.
Yes, you did.
Ahead of Megan Rapinoe's final regular season home game for the Reign this past year.
Yeah.
I told her it's because I wanted this to feel genuine.
Yep.
I wanted a connection to feel genuine, and it does.
Yeah.
So that's what this is. Rough and Tumble is the home of Circling Seattle Sports, and I'm so excited to finally announce this partnership.
I can't wait.